I know that shaping culture and changing culture isn't easy. I know that actually what you're doing already at UHMB is exemplary. Actually, the stuff we're talking about, in some ways, I hate that phrase, teach my granny to suck eggs, but do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not here in any way to criticize or say that we haven't got some of this stuff. It's to say, how do we make it even better? How do we become the very best we can be? And I know that the pressures that we're under every day to deliver the kind of care that we have to in the targets and the difficult things that we have to face up to, that's really, really tough. And it's partly why we can't do this alone. It's why we don't change culture on our own. It's why we need team. It's why we need group leadership. And I don't believe leadership is hierarchical. I believe it's flat, it's among, it's with. So we've talked together about how we create a culture of joy and why that's so important, how we create a culture of kindness. And the last one, and it's much shorter really, but it's a culture of excellence. So if people asked us, what's our culture of how we work in Morecambe Bay? What's the culture between general practice and the trust? What's the culture between the CCG and the trust, or between mental health and community nursing or our ICCs? What's the culture? I want us to be able to honestly answer our culture is a culture of joy, a culture of kindness, and a culture of excellence. And that's what I want us to push for. And I know, and I challenged a whole room of GPs and consultants about this together recently, that some of the attitudes that pervade between different organisations and ways of working are sometimes so beyond disrespectful that we properly need to ask ourselves some big questions. Like the way that GPs sometimes view consultants is not with much kindness, and the way that consultants view GPs is not with much respect. And that has to shift because we're working differently now. We're not separate siloed organisations in competition with each other. We're collaborating to provide the very best care we possibly can for the people that live in this bay. And we need it to be the best. We need to develop that culture of excellence, and excellence does not come out of disrespect, slagging each other off and having attitudes that are from several decades ago. So there's something about how we create that. And I want us to be unafraid of creating a culture of excellence and creativity. I don't know if you like rugby. I'm a big rugby fan. I recently read a book called Legacy, which is all about the culture of the All Blacks rugby team. Now, they're the best team in the world. They're probably the best sports team in the world. They're incredible. And there's something about an All Black that when they put on their All Black jersey, it's like the biggest honour in their nation. It's like, you're here as an All Black. Oh my gosh, you've made it to the highest pinnacle of the best sports team in the world. And so when you put this jersey on, and I want that to feel like when we put our uniforms on, when we put our lanyards on, this feels like an honour. I work in the best healthcare system in the world. Who I am and what I do today really matters. How I turn up for work and what I do whilst I'm there is absolutely paramount. And I want it to be the best it can be. I want it to be excellent. I want us to create that culture of excellence. And part of, I think, what happened to the All Blacks team when they massively lost the World Cup a few years ago, when they were big time expected to win it, I think that's similar to what happened to us in Kirkup. There was a big wake-up call where we had to face up and go, we're losing. We're not being the best that we could be. And there's been an amazing journey of transformation. And we've got to a level, but I want to take us further. I want us to create such excellence in how we work and how we relate to each other and the kind of culture that we build. And that means that we've got to keep that humility, that we're unafraid to learn from the very best that's happening in the world. So when we're doing what's the best in the world, we want others to learn from it. But we also look out for what's the best stuff that's happening in other places and keep that learning, continuous learning. And actually that's one of the, I talked at the beginning about the IHI and the 4 things that make brilliant health and care systems. The first is a culture of joy. The second is social movement. So actually really partnering with your communities differently to help everyone be more healthy and well. The third one is continuous learning. And the fourth one is quality and safety. But we often just talk about quality and safety without thinking about those other 3 aspects. So culture of excellence means that we are unafraid to learn from the best, and sometimes that means going on learning journeys and finding out from other places and building those relationships with other places. And the All Blacks have a saying, which is the first learning is silence. and the second is listening. And one of the things that I also really love that they say, now this is a phrase the All Blacks use, and I think I've developed a kinder way of saying it. They say, we punch in the stomach, we don't stab in the back. I prefer, tell me to my face, don't slag me off behind my back. There's something, isn't there, about building that honesty in teams, that when we have people who it's difficult to work with, we have people who sometimes make our lives a bit of a misery, and the temptation is to build a sense of alliance around that person so we can slightly scapegoat them or push them away, or, it just feels good and therapeutic sometimes to really slag someone off and have a right moan about, oh, I can't believe the way they're working, I can't believe their attitude, or da-da-da-da-da, rather than sitting down and saying, just wanted to say that we're trying to do the very best job we can here, and when you do that, I teach quite a lot in the medical schools, and one of the feedback we got from the students at Manchester was, or some personal feedback to me, it was quite humbling actually. They said, Andy, so they write these honest appraisals, and unfortunately quite a number of students, I was really encouraging them. I was like, I want to know what I can do better. I don't really want to know what I can do better. I want to know what I can do better, please tell me. And on these forms, and they consistently wrote, you're really, really great at encouraging us and telling us what we're really great at. We have no idea what we can't do. We have no idea what we're bad at. We don't know what we're supposed to be improving. That is bad. That's bad as a mentor, it's bad as a leader, because actually we build people up, but we don't challenge. And there is something so important. If we're going to get a culture of excellence, absolutely we build people up. We've talked about that in the other bits. We've talked about connecting, we've talked about encouraging, we've talked about camaraderie, we've talked about how you tell people you love them and how they belong. There is something so important about sitting someone down, looking them in the eyes, not slagging them off behind their back, and telling them where they're going wrong. Telling them where their attitude sucks, telling them where, when they talk to patients a certain way, had they reflected how that might feel to that patient. I do live teaching with students where we have the students sitting and they do the consultation, or our junior doctors, and I watch them. And they hate this, but I often press a pause button in the middle of the consultation, say, I'm really sorry, I'm going to interject, I'm going to press a pause button here in this consultation. Just wait a minute. As a patient, I just want you to, because this is a learning environment and you've agreed to do this. How did it feel to be asked that question in that way right then? You see, like, the doctor go, because they know straight away. And actually, for a patient to feed back to them and say, you know what, that felt really disrespectful. But live learning, and how powerful is that? Because actually, what that patient wants is for that doctor to be the very best doctor they can be and not make that mistake again for another patient. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in clinics as a junior doctor and seen consultants face the other way whilst they've broken bad news. Look down at their feet, shuffle awkwardly, say things in the most appalling and clumsy ways, and we see it happen. We know that people are incredibly rude sometimes on ward rounds because they feel stressed. And actually, as leaders, we sometimes need to pull people aside, look them in the eye, not talk about them behind their back and say, when you do this on a ward round, it's a real embarrassment. We have to call that stuff out, because otherwise we're not going to reach the excellence that we need to. So absolutely there's trust and there's camaraderie and there's togetherness and there's joy and there's brilliance in the way that we work, but there's also calling it out. And that's hard. That takes proper guts and determination. And the other thing the All Blacks talk about is no big heads. Well, they actually say it in a much ruder way than that. But the reality is what we don't need is arrogance. What we don't need is people turning up and thinking they're so brilliant and so important that they can actually do and speak however they want to and have this kind of air about them. We don't need that. We don't need that attitude in our nurses. We don't need it in our doctors. We don't need it in our physios. We don't need it in anybody. We don't need it in our managers. We don't need it in our senior leaders. We need humility and a sense of who I am matters, but I'm not going to be an arrogant knob, to put it politely. There's just something so important about that and how we develop that culture. And that's why we do sometimes need to challenge each other and look each other in the eye and say, you know what, sometimes you're just a bit of a knob. This is how it feels to work with you sometimes. Do you know how the team feels working with you? to reflect that back sometimes is really, really powerful. And it does change. And they might not talk to you for 3 months, but 3 months down the line, they might actually be a really reflective, different person. And it takes guts and determination to do that, but we cannot let those kind of attitudes ruin teams or ruin ward environments. The next bit of culture of excellence is really that ability to fail early and adapt to change. And that's why psychological safety is so important. It's okay to fail. There have been some horrific cases in the press recently where people have made mistakes and have lost their jobs and are going to prison. Sometimes attitudes are terrible and wrong, and there is bad practice that can't continue. And where that's happened, you do have to call things to account. But where the pressure of the system's there and there's human error and all kinds of stuff, we need to be able to have a culture that is safe, in which people can fess up to where they've made mistakes rather than try and bury them and hide them. And we find a learning culture in which we help people develop. And so failing early. And also, when we try a new initiative, you know, if you're being creative and a member of your team's gone, can we try it this way? Can we do it this way? Yeah, let's try it. Let's lead in a way that allows people to innovate. Even, oh, we've done it that way before, love, and it didn't work. We tried it one way, this kind of before. Why don't we just adapt that a little bit and try it a different way? Yeah, great. Oh, 3 weeks later, I knew it wasn't going to work. It didn't work. It's okay, we failed early. Let's adapt and change and move on. Yeah? And then that last thing, that no question is too stupid. If we're going to create excellence, people have to ask stupid questions. I literally spend my entire life asking stupid questions. And that's how I learn stuff. There's so much stuff I don't know. There's so many phrases in meetings. I have no idea what little acronyms mean most of the time. Just, can we unpack that? Can we talk about it? Let's just call it out. So it's that whole attitude shift. And that's where I want us to kind of go as a group of leaders as we try and change to become even better. As we break down the walls and barriers between general practice and the trust, mental health, community nursing, all the ways we're going to have to shift our culture. We've got ways of working in our siloed cultures. We're talking about a cross-bay partnership. We're talking about working together in ways we've never worked before and getting the culture right. And what I'm pushing for, and I'm really hoping we can build together, is that culture of joy, culture of kindness, culture of excellence. Now, the reality is we can't do it alone. But my favourite hashtag on Twitter is together we can. I really believe that. I really believe that together we can actually establish the kind of culture in which people want to work, where Morecambe Bay becomes the best place to work of anywhere in the world. Why shouldn't it be? Why shouldn't we create a culture together that's so amazing to work in that you just want to turn up and do the very best job you can, where you know there's a real sense of joy in your work, there's kindness in how you're treated, there's excellence in how you do your job, and it's just amazing to be part of these teams, so that no matter where you find yourself in different parts of this system, that you can be consistently hopeful and aware that we've built a culture that is incredible, and that allows us to provide the very best care of anywhere in the world. So that's my plea. I know it's not going to be easy, but I couldn't think of a more key bunch of leaders to talk to than the matrons. And I am really excited that we get to explore and partner this some more. It's not going to be easy, but if we could hold those three things in the forefront of our minds and our hearts and keep talking about them and revisit them and think about them and talk about them over cups of tea, how can we do it? How can we build a real culture of joy, kindness and excellence? We've already got it, definitely to a level, but how do we go beyond and become the very best we can be? Thanks for giving me time this morning. I really, really appreciate the honour of that. I'm hoping I can come back again soon and talk more about population health, but for now, doing an amazing job, thank you, and let's build this together. Cheers.
Thank you.